Welcome to a post-game Boilers Extra. Probably the last time we get to sit outside and do one of these things, probably, at least from Ross-Ade Stadium, I'm sure. I'm Nathan Baird from the Star.
Sam King from the Journal and Courier.
And we are talking about Purdue's 26-20 overtime loss to Northwestern, second overtime loss in the last three games, seventh consecutive loss overall. And what I wrote in my insider for IndyStar.com, which should be up any moment, see, right in the middle of the environment there, cars ripping by. What I wrote was that I thought the way this came down to that decision in the fourth quarter that Ryan Walters made to go for it on fourth down rather than kick the field goal and then in overtime, yeah, to make Northwestern then have to score. I thought that just exemplified Purdue football's entire season, because for so much of this season, it's been just a series of choices between two decisions, two like low upside decisions or two bad options. And it's like it's just constantly damned if you do, damned if you don't. And that goes back to, do you fire Graham Harrell or do you stick with an offense that's stuck in neutral? Or maybe reverse. Do you then once you fire him, what do you do as an offensive coordinator? And then once you, as Ryan Walters, decide to become the offensive play caller, what does that mean for your defense, which clearly has holes? It's just been it's just one after another. Every week, it seems like there isn't one of these decisions, and then they keep happening in game. And I thought that was evident on 3 or 4 occasions today, where there was really no good decision, and it seems like and they always lead to unsatisfying outcomes, obviously, with 7 straight losses. And it just seems like I thought that the way that played out in the overtime absolutely just kind of encapsulated this losing streak.
No, that's definitely a really good alliteration. Just it felt like, and we talked about this before we went live. There was a situation where it's 17-13, Northwestern leads, and it's going to be a situation where you can take a penalty, push Northwestern out of field goal range, but then you still have to stop the team from converting a 3rd and long.
Yeah, it probably, I don't know if it would have pushed them out of field goal range. It would have had to been like a 51-yarder. That's not unheard of. They also would have had another play on 3rd down to get some of that yardage back.
Right.
But it might have pushed them back to where they had to go for it from 51 yards.
And then you decline. Northwestern says, okay, we'll kick the 41-yard field goal, and then Purdue drives down. Great drive to go down and score, but now it's 20-20. Right. And, even though both teams had the ball again, ultimately it goes to overtime. And that, maybe missing a long field goal or not being close enough to attempt a field goal changes the outcome there.
Yeah, and go back to the other 4th down decision that was discussed after this game, the one in the first half. It's 4th and 4. Purdue's got the ball at their own 48-yard line, and they decided to go for it on 4th and 4 there. This is early in the game, second quarter. And so that's already a tough decision. Ryan Walters decides, between what it could mean for my defense and what it could mean for my offense, I feel like he felt like Purdue needed the spark. He felt like Purdue had to try to keep possession in a game where Northwestern is playing deliberately offensively, trying to limit possessions, frankly, what Purdue did the week before, 2 weeks ago against Oregon. And he decides to go for it. But the downside is when you don't get, by the way, then Ryan Brown encounters the decision where all of his receivers are covered. And it's, do I throw downfield or do I run it or do I throw it underneath and hope something happens? He chose the latter. That's a much more split second decision. And they only get 2 yards, and Northwestern goes 50 yards to go up 17-3. And there was a decision actually late in this game that there were so many of them today that we forgot to ask him about the holding call. It was just another day where the margin for error is so small that any one decision just is magnified if it doesn't come home. And Ryan was Walters was sort of asked about that after the game, right? I think you asked him, doesn't it feel like you have to capitalize on literally every single opportunity? There's so many examples, but it does feel like this team, if it lets one opportunity go by, if it doesn't completely capitalize on something, then it's not winning.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I wrote. Where things are a bit maximized, maybe not so much in the moment, but when you look at the grand scheme of a 26-20 overtime loss, that was a beautiful first play of the game. The
Oh,
pass
yeah.
was there, perfect. Dropped it in between the defenders, and it's dropped.
I mean, that's everything they probably worked on for 2 weeks. They knew C.J. Smith was coming back. They knew Northwestern didn't know anything about C.J. Smith other than his Madden rating, and then he had played at Georgia. Like, they probably didn't know anything about it. And they've got Hudson Card back, and Northwestern doesn't know who's going to start, although probably could have guessed that he was going to start. But I mean, they have a lot of things in their favor. They execute that play. There was like both like an RPO and then also a pump fake. So he pumps the safety off and gives him one-on-one coverage and hits him in the hands. He drops it.
Yeah,
like it just like everything that they did for 2 weeks goes right, and they hit the moment, and then
yeah. 2 plays later, Purdue's punting. Northwestern gets the ball, comes down, makes a horrible decision on a 3rd down on a ball that should have been picked off by either Dylan Thieneman or Smiley Bradford. Both of them went for it. Neither one of them got it. Northwestern kicks a field goal and leads 3-0. I thought those 2 plays early, that's the first 8 minutes of the game. And what really could have been, a huge turnover that keeps points off the board, or a big play that probably sets you up for points, and you get 2 negative outcomes out of both of those.
I mean, it's at least a 6-point swing, maybe a 10-point swing. So I don't really know how much more there is to break down from the game than that. I mean, it was a game. This felt like a must win in a lot of ways,
right,
because of what the rest of this schedule is. They play Ohio State next week at Ohio State. Ohio State just beat Penn State today, 3-4. They play Penn State 2 weeks after that. In between there, they go to Michigan State on a short week, and then they end against Indiana, which is like the hottest team in college football this year. The surprise team of college football this year, 9-0 for the first time in their history after beating Michigan State today, or they're on their way to it. I don't know if that game's over. But this seemed like your last chance, not just for a win, but I also thought it was maybe the last chance to have a good, a clean table to lay out your proof of concept.
Right, yeah.
Like, you're not going to have NFL talent on the other side of the ball in this game. You're not going to have disadvantages at a lot of positions. You're not going to have, frankly, the coaching disadvantage that it appears you are now going to have against Michigan State and Indiana, 2 places where first-year head coaches have come in and done good things. Not Michigan State's not running away with it, but they've been solid.
They've improved for sure. Yeah,
they've been fine, and they've been better than Purdue has for sure. So this was your one chance and your last chance, and now you have to hope you kind of go shock the world in one of these last 4 games. And I don't like this team's chances of doing that. You were playing a team like the worst. You wrote about this earlier this week, like the worst offense in the Big Ten, arguably, coming into this game. And they go 6 of 7 on 3rd downs in the first half. The only team in the Big Ten against FBS teams that had not converted at least 25% of its 3rd downs went 6 of 7 on 3rd down in the first half against Purdue. And it was only 2 possessions, right? Purdue had the first possession. I mean, I'm sorry, they had 3 possessions because one, or 4 possessions because one was an interception. So 4 possessions, they go 6 of 7 on 3rd down. They had 2 touchdowns and a field goal to give them 17 points. It was just, I thought, another example of where Purdue is always playing from behind, where it makes bad offenses look good and good offenses look great. In so many ways, this needed to be like a change of the season. This needed to be changing the conversation, and all it did was amplify the conversation.
These are not 3rd and 1s that they're converting either.
Right. Some of them were, but there were some long ones too.
If there's anything to take out of this that you feel good about, I guess it's that not only did Hudson Card come back, he played, I don't count the Indiana State game. He played his best game of the season. But at this point, now you're going to have to play flawless football to even have a chance probably in at least 3 of these final 4 games. So, Ryan Walters was non-committal on a quarterback situation. I'll be baffled if Hudson Card is not playing most, if not all, of the snaps, unless you just throw in the towel on the season.
The quarterback thing was another example of where you're stuck between, I think, 2 bad decisions, because they clearly had a plan to come into this game. Hudson Card was going to start, but Ryan Brown was going to play, and it wasn't going to be specialized niche red zone goal line sort of thing. He was going to play. He was going to be the quarterback for series, and I guess it looked like they had clearly said, okay, first 2 series are Hudson's, the next 2 series are Brown's, but today Hudson Card comes out and is throwing the ball well, and they're moving the ball. The first series was kneecapped by Smith dropping that pass. The second series leads to a field goal. So they've got points on the board. And then, but Card at that point was 4 of 7, not including the drops. He should have been 5 of 7. Like clearly there was some rhythm that was building there. And instead they go to Ryan Brown because that was the plan coming in, because they had told Ryan Brown. So then again, you have a bad decision. Either you stick with Hudson Card, which interrupts the plan that you'd been spending 2 weeks building and kind of telling Ryan Brown to take a hike, or you switch quarterbacks and hope that Ryan Brown comes in and immediately leads a spark. Neither of his drives led to points.
I wrote something to this degree after the game that Ryan Walters is a very honest person. He told both of these quarterbacks they're going to play, but nobody was going to fault him for going off of his word if he says we're going to stick with Hudson Card and it works. You
owe the whole roster a win more than you owe either Hudson Card or Ryan Brown anything. You owe that whole roster a win more than you owe any single player anything. I get where he's coming from. I think I would have probably bailed on it after one. And it wasn't like Ryan Brown was terrible, but I just thought it was obvious that Hudson Card gave you more of a downfield passing threat, which, by the way, was working. Like it was something that they could hit Northwestern with, at least initially. It looked like something they could build with. But again, even the first half where they moved the ball well, it took that 2-minute drive right before halftime by Hudson Card. And Ryan Brown led a good 2-minute drive at the end of the Illinois game, too. I can't say that there isn't some proof of concept on that. But Hudson Card comes in, leads that 2-minute drive. They get that touchdown. It felt like there could be some momentum built off of that. But I just felt like that if you any number of games have come this way. Like it feels like they're a long way from winning. But you can probably take away 1 third down conversion in this game that Northwestern had, and it changes the complexion of everything. You can take back just that kickoff that dropped against Illinois. It changes the complexion of that game. You can take back any one thing that happened against Northwestern. It changes the complexion of that game. I just feel like it, but it's not the sign of a team that's almost there in their case. It's the sign of a team that kind of can't get out of its own way. And it just, again, has just no margin for error.
No, I felt like that was this team's, I guess, for lack of a better word, identity last year was it would make the minimal mistakes that cost Purdue winning games. And then this year it's been, 2, maybe 3 games that you could say you were competitive in. If you're counting the Nebraska game, which was, 3
they
nothing
led
in
the
third
Nebraska
quarter.
game late in the third quarter.
Yeah.
It was 3-0, but they led it.
And the other games have been completely lopsided. But you're not in a position where you can make even minor mistakes. I think there was a 3rd and 17 where somebody got a hands to the face, so it's an automatic first down for Northwestern on a drive. I don't remember if that drive ended up with points or not, but Purdue can't afford any mistakes right now, and it seems like the minor mistakes it can't afford are piling up in monumental moments in these games where it does have a chance to compete.
And I thought, even in overtime, so they don't get that play, and then Northwestern gets hit with an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty after the play, which first of all, I thought it was really going to bail them out because that had happened earlier in the game. I can't remember what it was, but like they did something dumb and a penalty had given them a first down. Do you remember what? I can't remember what that was. It was a pass interference maybe. Anyway, they got bailed out on something early in the game.
There was a face mask that was on a sack.
Yes. I think that was what it was. But then, okay, so it's after the play. So it's 15 yards back. So instead of starting from the 25, where you're basically starting from field goal range and all you need is a field goal, now you got to start from the 40. And you've probably got to get at least 10 yards or 15 to get in comfortable field goal range again, right? And you think that that's like a big break for Purdue. And now you got a chance to go to second overtime. And now you'll be on offense second, which is the big advantage. And Northwestern kind of, I think, just looks at that and laughs and is like, well, we'll just go to the edge. Like, we'll just get like 20
We'll run this
yards
play that worked earlier twice in a row and score
We'll
touchdown.
just go our 18 yards off the edge here. And then now Purdue's back on its heels and it scores a touchdown on the next play, 22-yard touchdown. It was 8 explosive passing plays allowed today by Purdue. I think Northwestern came in averaging like 5 against FBS opponents. Just not an explosive offense at all. Purdue's defense makes Northwestern look more explosive. So I guess now there's really, we have to at least touch on what this means for the program going forward, because I've been saying for a few weeks, just like my conversations around the program were that no decision had been made on Ryan Walters. There was still belief in Ryan Walters,
Right.
but that there had to be proof of concept. There had to be proof of that what they're doing could lead to wins. And here you have a winnable team coming to your building. Northwestern, by the way, I thought this was a really poorly coached game by Northwestern in a number of facets.
Right.
They did some things in their passing game.
They ran
today.
2 quarterbacks too.
They did 2 quarterbacks today, one of whom was a catastrophe. Like the interception that Helinski threw is one of the worst balls that I've seen thrown in a game all season. And I cover Purdue. Like it was abysmal. And actually Purdue's passing isn't really all that. It's not usually, the problem isn't usually bad passes. I shouldn't say that. But like they came in and just made, I thought, any number of, like they seemed frazzled at times in a way that even Purdue didn't. They seemed like offensively to just at times panic, but then they were still able to just pull out big plays when they needed them. So again, a vulnerable team playing them at home. You have 2 weeks to prepare. But again, that goes back to the bad decisions. You have two decisions, and it's like either you commit to either Card or Brown at the beginning of the 2 weeks. So one quarterback has 2 weeks to prepare with the number one offense, or in order to be fair to both of them, you give them both a chance to be with the number one offense for 2 weeks. And I don't know if that affects the way this game turns out. But it's just one more example of where they just seem caught between two things where the upside is limited.
Right.
Or where there's some kind of drawback to making the higher upside play. Because the higher upside play would have been to say, listen, Hudson beat you out in the preseason. He is the better quarterback. He's healthy. He's going to be the starting quarterback in this game. We want you to be ready to come in, just like you were against Wisconsin, just like you were the week of the Illinois game when it turned out he couldn't play. But he is starting because he's the better quarterback, because that was determined by weeks and weeks of play over the summer. That would have been, I think, the better way, because you needed this win. You owed your whole roster, and maybe beyond that, but certainly your whole roster, a win more than you owed any single player anything.
Yeah, and the people who are donating money to the NIL fund as well, because that's when you start talking about where this program is, and there's a lot of noise out there. I'm sure everybody can assume kind of what we're referring to, but
I mean, there's noise as to whether or not they're going to make a coaching change,
right? And if you do that, that's money you're still going to have to pay a coach who's no longer working here. You're already paying an offensive coordinator who's now coaching quarterbacks at the high school level and is the highest paid high school quarterbacks coach in the country, probably. So
I don't know if it's even like the money is almost a secondary issue to me. I wrote earlier this year what the money situation was once Ryan Walters started firing people, which kind of brought the firing conversation into the forefront. And I don't think that's why they would or wouldn't make this decision. I don't know if that money would then take money away from something else. I don't know that, but I don't think that's why they wouldn't make a decision on football. But I also think that this is, again, now Mike Bobinski's the one that has two bad options to choose from. Because on one hand, you're keeping a coach intact where things have gone this poorly and just seem this fractured. Then when I mentioned the recruiting class and what's going on with that, that's not set up for long-term success. So now you're looking into the portal again after the season. The results have not been great on what they got out of the portal last year. And the bigger drawback with the NIL, Ryan Walters was asked earlier this week. I think Ryan Walters has been very honest with us about a lot of things this year. I don't think he's passed the buck. I think he's taken the burden on himself, the blame for himself. And I respect him for that.
Yeah, that's kind of who in the 2 years now or year and a half that I've dealt with him, that's kind of who I think he is.
Well, earlier this week, he was asked, do you have everything you need to win at Purdue? And he said, yes. That's not true. Because if they had the NIL in place to keep their best players, this team would be better, right?
Yeah.
If Nick Scarton were still here, if Deion Burks were still here, and he did get hurt this year, but like if he were still here and healthy, this team would be better. And if you had then been able to add players on top of that. So I think that's the one area, like it's demonstrably Purdue isn't, if you're a Power 5 team, Power 4, and teams can come in and take your best players and you cannot count. They did make counter offers, at least to Scour, and I assume they did to Burks, and they were just inadequate counter offers. if you can't keep your best assets here, I don't know I don't know what coach is going to build momentum. You can fire Ryan Walters if you want to, but who are you going to install that then builds anything if all of your best players are leaving at the end of every year? There's no way forward with that. So that does have to get fixed regardless of whatever is going on with who you have as the head coach. And if you make a head coaching change, there's going to be player attrition regardless.
Right.
These players, this isn't like some other situations we've seen where it's the 4th, 5th, 6th year and players are kind of starting to grumble and give up and turn. Like, I don't necessarily think that that's happening behind the scenes. Players do still seem to genuinely like Ryan Walters. I've been talking to players off to the side after practice the last couple of weeks and kind of trying to get that vibe, and they all seem still bought into this coaching staff. But more will leave if you fire the coach, I think, because that's just a natural thing. And then now you have to do what they did 2 years ago, which is hire a coach, and on the fly, that guy has to go in the portal and rebuild the roster. And you saw how that turned out. Like, it didn't get you there. So that's a bad option. Either way, I think it's also a bad option if you're 2 years in hitting the reset button on everything. In this day and age, where, again, the player attrition can hit you so hard, there were schools coming for some of the other best players on this roster after last year, big schools, and they turned them down. But
after a season like
this, how much does that change? So, I just think it is a bad option either way. But then it goes back to this. So if you keep him, what does that mean for your NIL fundraising efforts? Are people still willing to give you the money necessary to go keep your players as well as you can and make additional acquisitions? Or are you going to have trouble raising even as much money as you had last year? It's just damned if you do, damned if you don't at every turn. And I don't envy the position that someone like Mike Bobinski is in, because I see there's upside, I guess, to either choice you make and downside to both as well.
Yeah, and that kind of goes full circle to what we started with. So probably a good place to wrap up.
We'll wrap it up there. We'll be doing these throughout the basketball season too, I'm sure. Maybe not after every game. Maybe we won't do one Monday night, season opener for basketball, just over our down the hall here, down the hill. But we'll keep these coming after football games too. Purdue at Ohio State next week. Ohio State came into the season as national championship favorite. Ohio State came into the season national championship favorite. Purdue came in picked to finish last in the Big Ten, and both of those teams have more or less held those trajectories. Obviously, Purdue has. So we'll see. This is going to be an Ohio State team that its last 3 games have been a loss at Oregon by 1 point, a grind of a win over Nebraska that kind of shocked people and stirred up that whole fan base that they didn't blow out Nebraska the way Indiana had, and then I think a reasonably comfortable win today over at number 4 Penn State. So I think they are probably looking to tee off on somebody, quite frankly. And knowing that program, it's not a program that is going to keep guys in the fourth quarter and run up the score, but it's a program that talent-wise, I've seen 2021 Michigan State, when they were a number 5 team. Purdue beat Michigan State that year, but that Michigan State team came to Ohio Stadium and was down 42-0 at halftime.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, there's no CJ Stroud for Ohio State right now, but there's plenty of other good players, and this is going to be another sort of proof of concept week for Purdue to show that it can sort of rise to the occasion, and I think do something better than it did against Oregon. It can't just be that you held on to the ball and kept the score low. Smack somebody in the mouth and do something and make Ohio State feel uncomfortable at some point in this game.
Yeah, just one thing that Ryan Walters has said over and over, and he said it today after the game, you have to stick to the process, and it's hard right now. I do commend him for saying this is how we do things, and we're not changing it. This is my system. This is whatever, but it's not working. And the things that they tried today were a couple trick plays. One worked, kind of, I guess, if you kind of.
That's what it was. One of the trick plays, they got some help on.
Yes,
that was where the face mask penalty. Yeah. So it was right. That was the reverse flea flicker.
Yes,
he got sacked on, but they got a face mask, so that gave them the play. And then the other trick play was down in the red zone. It was like a double pass, right? It was like a backwards pass.
Pass it to Shamar Rigby,
true freshman Shamar Rigby, who then passes for a completion. But man, was it hairy. Like that was hairy. That was a touchdown drive though that they finished off, right?
It was a third down and short inside the 10, and it got you 8 yards to the 1, which Maccabee then scored a touchdown on the next play.
And again, I just think that like Ryan Walters did this like 2-week crash course to become the offensive coordinator, starting with the Illinois game. I still think that was a really bold move that has actually kind of more or less paid off, at least for the offense, but it hasn't paid off for the defense.
No.
They could use his help, and he can't really give them much as the offensive coordinator now. And I think it's tough to be the head coach and be processing the bigger picture of some of these decisions while also calling the plays. Especially when you're not an offensive play caller. I just think it's another damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like, I don't know what else to say. I hope that doesn't get us an explicit rating. I think I've said damned 3 times. So anyway, we said we were going to wrap up 3 minutes ago. So thanks for watching. We will talk to you again soon.
Yeah.